Good afternoon, everybody. Thank you so much for coming to the Fayetteville Public Library today. My name is Joel Bunch. I'm a reference librarian, and just want to welcome you. If you're watching on our live stream, thank you very much for tuning in. Quickly, before we get started, you'll notice there are feedback forms in your chairs. Take a moment, just let us know what you thought about today's program. There's a little box in the back. We'd love to hear from you about that. And today we are pleased to be featuring Ann DuHamel. Today's program is called Prayers for a Feverish Planet, and Ann is from the University of Minnesota Morris. She's an associate professor there, and I'm going to let her tell you a little bit more about herself and about today's pieces. Please join me in welcoming Ann DuHamel. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Joel. Well, good afternoon, everybody. It's really nice to see you here. Thank you so much for coming. This is my first ever time in Arkansas. I just got here last night. I came from Texas and Oklahoma, so it's a beautiful state, really nice time of year to be here. And I want to thank the people who made this possible, Joel and Leah Frieden from the library, and my colleague Tomoko Kashiwagi from the University of Arkansas. So I'm going to tell you a little bit about my project before I play to give you some context. In the fall of 2019, I had a moment where I realized I was hearing more and more news about climate change, and it just hit me really hard, and I began to feel quite despondent about this. And I thought, what can I do? And I decided I want to do something creative about this, and I'm a professor of piano, so I thought, well, maybe I can put together a piano recital that's all music about climate change. So there are quite a few pieces that are nature-related in the piano repertoire, but I only knew of one piece that was specifically about climate change. So I launched what's called a call for scores, and I advertised to composers, and I asked them to send me their pieces that are specifically related to or responding to somehow climate change. And I got this amazing response. So I put out my call for scores in January of 2020, and it was open for about 9 months. And during that time, more than 170 composers from all around the world sent me their pieces for piano and electronics. And some of the pieces were composed in 2020. Some of the pieces were composed in the years leading up to 2020. Some of the pieces were one-movement pieces. Some of the pieces they sent me were multi-movement pieces or sets of piano works. And if I counted up all of the individual movements, it was more than 300 individual movements of music. So it took me a very long time to go through all of this music. It took me about a year. And during this process, I realized that there were so many pieces that I found thought-provoking and imaginative and interesting that I didn't want to limit myself to just a 1 hour long recital. So I ended up choosing about 60 pieces. It's a lot of music. I'm not going to play 60 pieces for you today, don't worry, because that takes about 8.5 hours. Today I'll play just about an hour of music, and then I'll speak a little bit. So that's my project, Prayers for a Feverish Planet. Earlier this year, in April, during Earth Day, the week of Earth Day at my campus in Morris, Minnesota, I presented all of the pieces over 8 programs, and I grouped them loosely by theme. So I had a program that was all pieces about water, and I had a program that was all pieces about human progress, and I had a program that was about trees and hope, and like that. And I had a guest speaker join me for each one of those programs. So I have a friend who's a hydrologist. He spoke at the program about water. Our sustainability director from my campus joined me for one. Professors from environmental studies joined me. I had a climate activist join me. So that was a really amazing experience. It was very intense because I did it over 4 days. Now what I'm doing this year, I'm on a sabbatical, and I'm traveling around and playing subsets of my project, and it's been a really rewarding experience for me, so I hope that you enjoy the music that you hear today. You'll see that I have a QR code here which will take you to a more complete digital program. There will be some program notes up on the screen, but a more complete program is there, is a PDF that I have in my Google Drive. And I think it should be available so anybody can read it. Most of the composer bios are there, although I think there are a couple that are not on that program. And then I have a more complete bio of my own on there as well. And I guess the piano is cutting off my website there. But you could just go to my website, which is annduhamel.com, and under projects, you'll see Prayers for a Feverish Planet. So for today, I've loosely grouped the pieces I'm going to play for you. I'm going to play 11 pieces into these different parts. So the first part is Sea and Sky. I'll play 3 pieces. I'll start with White Parasol by Ian Dickey. This piece was composed in 2008. Actually, there will be program notes up on the screen, so maybe I won't say too much about that. Bird Flight by Anel van de Venter. She's from South Africa, and she is a medical doctor, but she also composes. This is the 3rd movement of a suite, Bird Flight. And then Laura Schwendinger teaches at the University of Wisconsin in Madison, Wisconsin. And Air is the 2nd movement of a suite called Magic Carpet Music. That was originally for a chamber group, and she transcribed it for piano. And that piece, I'm just going to let you know, that piece is a little bit more abstract, but think of it as, air is very ethereal and there's lots of space. And the way she uses musical register and time is to capture that. And I wanted to say one other thing, just because I don't know how much contemporary classical music everybody in the room listens to, and sometimes it can be a little challenging for us. So one thing you can think about is different periods of music, different things are considered aesthetically important and beautiful by composers. So if we listen to the music of J.S. Bach in the Baroque period, he wrote in very contrapuntal fashion, which means there's like a line of melody and another line of melody and another line of melody, so it's very linear. And he was also influenced by dance forms. And then when we move into the 18th century, the classic period, Mozart and Beethoven, they were very influenced by form and harmony and melody and regular phrases. So those are kinds of things that we hear. And then we move into the 19th century, the Romantic period, where everything gets bigger dynamics. It's very emotional music. There's lots of give and take in the flow. So one of the things you can think about when you're listening to the sometimes challenging contemporary music is composers are really interested in sonic color and texture. Color and texture. So you will hear melody and you will hear, phrases, but you'll hear different harmonies. Sometimes they're dissonant, not always, but think about those ideas of color and texture. Okay, I'm gonna start, and I want to say one other thing about White Parasol, which is that the tempo marking that Professor Dickey has at the beginning is ice cracking. So very evocative. Okay, here are the first 3 pieces. The next two pieces I'll play are both pieces about trees. So Chris Williams is a composer from the UK, but he lived in India for a while. He wrote the Sweet Trees of India. And Jacaranda is the second movement of this suite. So when he was living in India, there was a stand of trees that were taken down in order to like expand a road and build a shopping center. So kind of lots of things about climate change in that. And then Dario Duarte is a composer from Argentina, and what you want to listen for in Stop Deforestation is how there's a pattern set up in the left hand and how it becomes sparser over time. So it gets thinner and thinner and thinner. So the next two pieces I've grouped together under the category of human choices. So Solipsismo by Eric Tapia. Eric Tapia is a Mexican composer, and the word solipsism, well, so he has an inscription on the score, which you'll see. We'll have it on the slide. But the word solipsism is somebody who who's solipsistic is like very self-centered and just totally interested in themselves. And so I was thinking about how people who are totally
Narcissistic.
yeah, basically narcissistic, like self-involved, and they don't consider other people, how that can be considered a contributing factor to climate change, because, not considering the environment you're in. And then the second piece in this group is Heat Island by Frank Horvat, who is a Canadian composer. And so Heat Island is this effect that happens when you're in a city, you have a lot of cement and concrete, and just it gets warmer and warmer and warmer and warmer. And his piece is sort of minimalistic, so if you ever listen to the music of like Philip Glass, it shares some characteristics with that. And he also has some very long pedals, which for me is like part of the being uncomfortable if you're in a place that has a lot of heat. But at the beginning, so that piece starts low, and by the end of it, it gets higher, and he's doing that to introduce a little bit of hope into the piece. So here's the next set. right. So I have 3 pieces in the next group. These are pieces about anxiety and grief, real response that we might have to climate change. And I actually learned, I've been doing quite a bit of reading about climate change. There's a word that describes this, solastalgia. So this word was coined by an eco-philosopher named Glenn Albrecht about 20 years ago. He coined it about a different particular thing that was going on in Australia. But solastalgia is feeling of existential dread when your environment changes. I will have a hopeful piece at the end after I have this group. So there are 3 pieces here. Let's see. Clifton Calender is currently at a university in Florida. I think he teaches at Florida State University. And you'll see his pieces inspired by a quote by the Buddhist monk Thich Nhat Hanh. I feel, he hasn't said that it's a heartbeat, but to me it sounds like there's sort of a heartbeat motive in the piece. And it's also very contrapuntal, but in a much different harmonic language than Bach. Much different harmonic language than Bach. Bospa Pan is a Cambodian composer. And she studied at the New England Conservatory, and I believe and maybe also in Paris, France, and I believe now she's in Cambridge, England. And this piece sounds to me a lot like the music of Claude Debussy. And just like with Debussy Preludes, the title that she has here, it actually appears at the end of the score. So it means the little time that we have left. And you will hear an ostinato in this piece, which is a repeated pattern that happens over and over. And then Alex Bertzos also teaches at a school in Florida. He teaches at the University of Central Florida, which is in Orlando. And he was based in New York for many years. And his piece, Perforation, is, he composed it in 2018, and it's not specifically about climate change, but you will see the poem that inspired it, which to me is a lot about grief. So here's the next set. Thank you. I have one final piece to play for you today, and I want to just take a moment to thank you again for coming. I really appreciate it. So I want to end on something hopeful, and this is a piece by David Evan Thomas, who is a composer based in Minneapolis and St. Paul, Minnesota, Landscape of Shadow and Light. And I like this idea of shadow and light, which is like both, something that's inside of us and things that create beauty in the world. So I hope you enjoy it, and if you want to chat afterwards, I'd love to talk to you. Thanks. thank you again so much for coming. Have a great afternoon.
Can I ask a question?
Yeah, you bet.